Your picture of the entire story. You need a breakdown of the constant stream of events, top stories, expert analysts, and the best journalists bringing you real voices on the ground. We're breaking it all down on The Rundown. Get the facts, stay informed, and be a voice of reason for the Middle East.
Introducing the brand new i24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions, and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News Video On Demand app today.
Hello and welcome to Middle East Now. These are tonight's top stories. Lebanese arm wrestling. President Aoun determined to get Hezbollah out of arms. Humanitarian in, humanitarian out. Israel reconsidering its Gaza aid policy. And the kingdom and the threat after the foiled terror plot. Jordan and the U.S. getting on the same page. We begin tonight in Lebanon, where President Joseph Aoun is drawing new red lines, revealing a plan to bring all weapons under the exclusive control of the state this coming year. Aoun seeks to achieve this through direct talks with Hezbollah, or not, while ensuring the country avoids internal strife. But Hezbollah, at this point in time, remains firmly opposed to the proposal. Here's more.
Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has announced the plans to place all weapons in Lebanon under state control this year, signaling a significant shift in the country's political and military landscape. In an interview with a Qatari-affiliated news outlet Al Arab Al Jadid, Aoun explained that this change would happen through dialogue, specifically a direct bilateral approach between the presidency and Hezbollah. Aoun stressed that while removing Hezbollah's weapons is a priority, it must be done in a way that avoids triggering internal conflict. In a recent meeting with U.S. Deputy Mideast Envoy Morgan Ortagus, he made it clear, quote, "We want to remove Hezbollah's weapons, but we will not ignite a civil war in Lebanon." Speaking on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the outbreak of the Lebanese civil war, Aoun emphasized that only the state can guarantee the protection of its citizens.
Since we all agree that any weapons not sanctioned by the state or outside the state's control would jeopardize Lebanon's interests for more than one reason, the time has come for all of us to say Lebanon can only be protected by its state, its army, and its official security forces.
Despite international pressure to suppress the Iranian-backed Hezbollah, Aoun pushed back against U.S. demands, instead urging Washington to focus on Israel. He pointed out that the continued presence of Israeli forces in 5 disputed areas in southern Lebanon gives Hezbollah a justification for maintaining its weapons. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has rejected Aoun's disarmament plan. Senior official Mahmoud Kamati reaffirmed to Lebanese news channel Al Jadid the group's commitment to its weapons. Quote, "We are not willing to dialogue with the President of the Republic through the media about the defense strategy while the enemy is still on our land." In another development, the governor of Beirut has ordered the removal of all political and sectarian slogans from the city, with the goal of creating a more neutral urban environment. Sources close to Hezbollah told Ad-Diyar, a Lebanese newspaper, that discussions about disarmament are ongoing, but without a clear timetable. Amid these tensions, Israel continued to target Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon. An IDF spokesman stated that Hezbollah uses a civilian infrastructure for military purposes, warning that Israel will take further action against the group. if necessary.
So for more, we want to turn now to Hussein Abdul Hussein, Research Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul Hussein, for your time. We appreciate it, as always. Well, a very ambitious, yet very timely plan here by President Aoun, with a very basic, reasonable plea that the monopoly of power will remain in the frameworks of the sovereign state. But how feasible is that, considering that not so typical Lebanese landscape?
We have to give him some time. I think the plan, which I read, it's Arabic original, is really a good plan. The only problem that President Aoun faces is that he doesn't have a plan B. He assumes that Hezbollah will concede. What if Hezbollah doesn't concede? What happens next? I think at this point, he might be trying to avoid, and I noticed that when he was asked the question, the removal of Hezbollah's or disarming Hezbollah, he tried to avoid that word, and he tried to spin it in a way that Hezbollah will voluntarily surrender its arms. And he tried to model the surrender the same way that Lebanese militias from the days of the Civil War surrendered their arms right after the end of the Civil War. So he has a certain model in his head. And I think this is a worthwhile discussion model. But what if Hezbollah doesn't cooperate? Then, he certainly needs a plan B.
So there is no or here. There is no certain ultimatum. So what happens if it is not being achieved through diplomacy? What is the leeway of Aoun vis-a-vis Hezbollah, if any at all?
Even while he says that Hezbollah, that he's talking to Hezbollah to convince them or to ask them to surrender their arms, he also said that the Lebanese army, meanwhile, has been taking over Hezbollah's tunnels, Hezbollah's ammunition and arms, detonating most of these arms, using or taking whatever they can use for the Lebanese armed forces. So he kind of gave the impression that while they talk, the Lebanese armed forces are actually taking over Hezbollah's armament. So I think, he's trying to be nice while he's doing it. But again, if Hezbollah digs in its heels, he will need a plan B.
Yeah, and meanwhile, reports Hezbollah leaders or some commanders rather, are leaving the country. So it remains unclear how bad is it for Hezbollah really. But Mr. Abdul Hussein, Aoun is receiving Western backing, no doubt about that, external backing. But is it enough? What's his legitimacy domestically?
Well, I think domestically, he and the Lebanese armed forces and the cabinet are by far more legitimate than Hezbollah, the militia, and whoever supports Hezbollah. Now, from the interview, we could also tell that while the Lebanese army is legitimate and performing its tasks and taking over Hezbollah's spots and arms caches, he said that the Lebanese army has limited capabilities, that they're planning of adding 4,500 to its personnel and maybe up to 10,000. He's saying that, and of course, the landscape in southern Lebanon is mountainous, which makes their mission harder. So he's saying that the Lebanese army has limits, but they're doing what they can do.
Well, perhaps, potentially, a new horizon for Lebanon. Hussein Abdul Hussein, Research Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you very much for your time, for your insight. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
For more now, we want to welcome here in studio security analyst Jonathan Regev. Thank you very much, Mr. Regev, for joining us. When we're talking about the Israeli standpoint here, obviously, as counterintuitive as it may sound, one would want their enemies to be as stable as possible. And Aoun, to an extent, is trying to do exactly that.
I agree with the first sentence of the previous guest. It's on paper, it's a beautiful plan, one that Israel would support. Why would Israel not support a plan in which Hezbollah disarms itself, even if it joins the Lebanese army, but not under a specific Hezbollah regiment, but under the Lebanese army control? Beautiful. I think that Israel really believes that this is something that President Aoun really wants to see happening. The only problem is, as it seems, no one really asked Hezbollah or their patrons in Tehran what they think about it. I didn't ask them either. My guess is they would say, no, we do not accept that, because there's a reason why Hezbollah exists.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Thank you, but no thanks. Yes, beautiful plan. No, simply because there's a reason why Hezbollah exists, and Hezbollah exists as the front arm of Iran on Israel's doorstep. Did Hezbollah take an extremely serious blow during the war with Israel? Absolutely. Are they finished altogether? No, absolutely not. And they are trying to rearm themselves. And now they do not have the Syrian route, in which so much ammunition was landing at Damascus and making its way into Lebanon. Yeah. That route is gone or almost gone, but they're working on other routes, and we've already heard about that. For example, the maritime route straight into the port of Beirut instead of making its way around the Middle East.
Right.
So I do not see Hezbollah agreeing to that so fast. Even if that would happen, and there would be some kind of a statement saying that Hezbollah is disarming itself, will Israel accept that, believe that, and say, you know what, everything's okay, we're leaving the 5 points that we're maintaining in southern Lebanon? The answer would be no. This is something that Israel would need years and years to see it happening. So peace, are Israelis going to travel to it in Beirut? Not so fast.
The Paris of the Middle East, right?
Used to be.
Used to be, and perhaps will be.
Maybe.
Yet again, and better. We will have to wait and see. Jonathan Regev, you're staying with us because we now want to turn our focus into that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group releasing a video of hostage Ron Brislavsky. It's the first video message from him. His family approves this shortened and blurred version of the video for publication. So let's take a look.
כל היום אני רק מגרד, וכל היום כואב לי, כולי, אני לא יודע מה זה המחלה הזאת. חלאס, חלאס. בבקשה ממך, אדוני ראש הממשלה, בבקשה. תוציא אותי מפה כבר. טראמפ, איפה אתה? איפה ההבטחות שלך? לא אמרת לנו לשחרר את כולם בעסקה?
We want to turn now to I-24 News correspondent Balir Sladin. You're at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Balir, again, it's not the first time we receive information about Ron Brislavsky. It's the first time, however, we see a video of him, and the family is naturally shaken to the core.
Definitely. This is the first time that the family is able to see him in a video speaking to the camera. At least we can see that he's alive. He mentioned in the video, as we've seen, some disease that he's suffering from. But again, he is alive, and we can see him in a video. Although that Sasha Trupanov, that was returned in the last deal back in February, did say that he was held alongside him, also by the Islamic Jihad, of course, and he has given a sign of life from him. Now we know that he is still there, of course, and is still alive. The family is not authorizing the publishing of the whole video, the not blurred version, because it, of course, is very difficult to see. And we know that this is becoming more frequent recently by the Islamic Jihad and the other Palestinian factions, including Hamas, of course. They are publishing more and more videos of Israeli hostages in the Gaza Strip because they know that this is the only leverage that they have. We also know that yesterday they've mentioned that the contact with the captors of Idan Alexander is lost because, as they claim, some Israeli airstrikes, and we are yet to know whether that's true or not. But we should also remember that they have even faked the death of one of the female Israeli soldiers, and it turns out that that was fake, of course, and she was returned alive and well back in January. So we know that they used this and now more frequently in order to put pressure on the families, and of course, understandably, the families will put pressure on the government in order to bring back the hostages as soon as possible. For now, at least, we see that the government is still, quote-unquote, immune for such pressure, and they are still sticking, the government is still sticking, of course, with the even disarmament of the Palestinian factions, alongside, of course, the release of all the hostages.
Yeah, Balir, we do have an offer on the table, an offer we understand now is officially being rejected by Hamas?
We don't have that officially yet, but several reports have been given an indication that Hamas will reject the current offer that for the first time includes the disarmament of the Palestinian factions in Gaza, something that they see as a red line. So we are expecting that that's what we're going to hear. Maybe we're going to hear it framed a little bit differently. They're going to say, no, but we have some more modifications and some changes that we need to do, and then maybe we will accept it in the future. So for now, we see that there is nothing official, although that they have said that they're going to respond in 48 hours. That was 2 days ago, so we should expect that to happen very soon, maybe in the next few hours. And also in the next few hours, a security assessment actually is planned by the government and the heads of the security establishment in Israel. By the way, including the head of the Shabak, Ronen Bar, that will be only on the telephone. That's after the cancellation of the assessment, the security assessment that was supposed to be yesterday in Gaza division and was boycotted by Smotrich and then cancelled. And the families, understandably, again, were very angry with that. So we see that today they're going to discuss mainly the issue of the hostages. Apparently, there is some development also on this side.
Yeah, zooming in and out time and time again. The bigger picture usually gets into the very nits and bits of the political bickering. Thank you very much, Bolir Sladina, 24 News senior correspondent, Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Back here with you in the studio, security analyst, Mr. Jonathan Regev. Mr. Regev, we are also hearing today Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz saying humanitarian aid will be renewed into the Strip. Then, after being criticized from all sides of the divide, coalition, opposition, hostage families, etc., backtracks to an extent, leaving everyone somewhat confused.
Absolutely confused, and I have to say, I read his initial statement a couple of times, and it does not specifically say Israel is renewing the humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. It does not say that. After I read the statement, and a few minutes later already so much criticism turned in that I read it again, and never that it does not say...
The words didn't change.
The words didn't change. It does say that Israel will in the future prepare some kind of a plan along with civilian companies to in the future, sometime in the future, put aid back into Gaza. Does that mean Israel is now putting aid back into Gaza? No, it does, I think, hint at the fact that in the future Israel would want to do that, but not in the way in which Israel sends aid trucks in, and then, of course, Hamas takes control and uses it either for its own purposes or to sell it in the black market for a very large sum of money. But the Israeli political spectrum is so uptight at the moment that everything...
that is being said or is not being said.
It seems as if truth does not matter anymore. There's some kind of a word which someone interprets, it's some interpretation of it one way or another, and then it blows up into something much bigger than what it really was. Yes, will Israel remain, will the gates of humanitarian aid to Gaza remain closed forever? The answer is probably no. At some point, aid will come in, and Israel will want that aid to come in, not directly to Hamas, but through other companies. But of course, Ben Gvir and Smotrich and even some members of the Likud party were quickly to jump.
Well, don't let the facts disrupt you, right?
Exactly, and it seems to be right for the entire political spectrum in Israel.
All right, on that note, we want to take a deeper look into what is currently unfolding in the Strip, and welcome Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, analyst and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Mr. Al-Khatib, thank you so very much for your time this evening. So the IDF is saying today no deadline for the ground operations in the Gaza Strip this time around. What does it look like? What do you make of it?
Well, unfortunately, things are getting pretty desperate for a lot of folks in Gaza. The situation isn't balanced for everybody across the Strip. There are parts of the coastal enclave that have better access than others. There are parts where there are, in fact, small markets, small access to aid, small access to medical treatment, small access to shelter that can sustain people for the next few weeks. Then there are parts, indeed, on the peripheries, if you will, of Khan Yunis, of the edges of Nusayrat in the center, near where the Netzarim corridor is, folks in Beit Lahia, folks on the edges of Shajaiya, folks on the southern edge of Khan Yunis that have very little access. So the prolonging of the longer this goes on, the more desperate things get for the folks that I'm speaking to on the ground.
And while we speak, we are seeing yet another round of protests this afternoon in some parts of the Gaza Strip. Are we likely to see more, or because the previous round did make some headlines, but eventually faded away?
Well, the idea didn't fade away, certainly. Right. What was a challenge is trying to sustain such a protest in an environment where you have Hamas's, thugs effectively walking around, beating people up. They beat to death several protesters, indeed, and then later on came out and accused them of being collaborators for the IDF. The unfortunately operational environment with the bombardment, with the lack of basic necessities is also yet another challenge. But nevertheless, what we've seen is a kind of a trend towards small yet consistent acts of local resistance to Hamas. Yesterday, we saw a hospital in Khan Yunis try to close its doors in protests over Hamas members taking over. So I'm very optimistic that this trend will continue, even if it goes up and down in how intense it is.
So, Mr. El-Khatib, before we thank you for your time, circling back to the issue of humanitarian aid, is there any current alternative on the ground rather than Hamas just seizing it and deciding where it goes, if at all?
I mean, on the one hand, I want to believe that there are some organizations that can do a better job than others in terms of managing the flow of aid, managing the distribution. I actually have wondered why there hasn't been a deliberate negotiations as part of the ceasefire, as part of the interaction through Qatari and Egyptian mediators for mechanisms and apparatuses for the distribution of aid, and putting Hamas on the spot, like making the aid issue not just the entry, but the distribution and the monitoring. Just as we saw with the monitoring of the Netzarim corridor with the Qatari, Egyptian folks and the American private military contractors, why don't we introduce something like that? Because unfortunately, I don't see a scenario in which the IDF can up close interact with the civilian population to ensure that they get the aid and not Hamas.
So wondering essentially why it had become part of the negotiations, a sticking point as part of an agreement or lack thereof. Ahmed Fouad El-Khatib, analyst and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, thank you very much for your time and for your insight. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan Regev here with us in studio. So with the lack of a feasible alternative, this discussion remains still up in the air. But if we're talking about the current state of the negotiations, or again, unfortunately, we're saying lack thereof, where are we heading? What is the next stage of the military campaign on the ground if negotiations are going nowhere?
What Israel wants to do is, if the negotiations do not progress anywhere, is to have an uptick in the military operation. This time around, also in the statement of Israel Katz this morning, was a plan in which Israel takes over area but does not withdraw, as happened in previous cases, but actually maintain presence in that area, evacuate the population in order to create military pressure on Hamas on behalf of the soldiers, and civilian pressure on Hamas on behalf of the Gaza citizens. Is it working? Israeli authorities are saying yes, and this is why Hamas was pushed to negotiations in the first place. Is it working enough for Hamas to agree to the Israeli terms? For the moment, no.
For the moment, no. Security analyst Jonathan Regev, thank you so very much for joining us in studio today. Thank you. Now to this, long months after October 7th, new research suggesting MDMA and ecstasy that the Nova Festival goers consumed that horrible night may have been helpful, protecting them slightly at least from the trauma. Our Jody Nalowicz brings us the latest.
As Shai Klein-Weinstein walked around a memorial honoring the nearly 400 people killed at the Nova Music Festival in southern Israel, artillery fire could be heard echoing from nearby Gaza. The 28-year-old photographer and survivor of Hamas's attack recalled names and events from that fateful day, some of which he captured on film, documenting the final moments of his fellow revelers. Klein-Weinstein, an immigrant from Canada who had arrived in Israel just 4 months prior to the attack, also recalled another detail from the festival, taking ecstasy. While still visibly shaken by the horrific experience, early findings from a study suggest that the MDMA Klein-Weinstein and others at the festival took may have been helpful in cushioning the impact of the trauma they endured. The Haifa University study, which was recently accepted for publication in the World Psychiatry Journal, monitored 657 Nova survivors, both those who took drugs and those who did not.
People that were under the influence of MDMA specifically while the attack occurred had somewhat of an improved clinical outcome 3 to 6 months post-event. So they slept better, they had more social interactions, they had less mental distress compared to people who were exposed to the same exact event right next to them but were not under the influence of MDMA.
While trauma research is well established, the attack on a gathering like the Nova Festival has opened a new window into the effects of trauma under the influence of mind-altering substances.
We're talking about 4,000 people who were exposed on the same day, on the same time to the same event, which is a very, like I said, horrifying event. So that's a very unique finding. It was never reported before because it was never studied before because it never happened before.
Klein-Weinstein said he is still struggling with trauma and has been undergoing therapy. Still, he believes the MDMA he took that night may have eased his symptoms somewhat.
Not too long ago, there was an interview by a media outlet, and in this interview, they said that Nova survivors were protected by the MDMA. You know, it saved us. It protected us from whatever, which I don't think is true, you know? I don't know anybody who didn't die because they were on MDMA. They were just as vulnerable as anyone else, and we were all in the same situation, but, you know, months after the fact, I think having been on these substances, specifically MDMA and ecstasy, I think it helped.
However, Adman was quick to caution that while MDMA may have offered a psychological buffer, the overall levels of PTSD among Nova survivors remained extremely high. He also noted that the study was limited by survivor bias, as researchers cannot learn from those killed in the attack.
2/3 of them were under the influence of different mind-altering substances during the attack.
We're taking a very short break, but when we get back, all the latest on the potential American withdrawal from Syrian soil and what does it mean for Israel. A very quick break. We'll be right back.
Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il.
Bad posture. the ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. Now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. On to this major regional and global development now. The U.S. military is planning a partial withdrawal from Syria, according to Israeli security officials, which was first revealed by 24 News military analyst from our fellow Hebrew channel, Yossi Yoshua. But Israel is sounding the alarm, warning the move could strengthen Turkey's hold on Syrian territory and threaten Israel's security. More in this next report.
The United States is preparing to withdraw a significant number of troops from Syria. I-24 News Hebrew channel's military analyst Yossi Yehoshua has learned that the Pentagon recently informed Israeli defense officials it plans to gradually reduce its military footprint in Syria over the next 2 months. But the decision is raising serious concerns in Israel. A senior Israeli official told I-24 News the country is working to persuade Washington to reconsider, warning that a reduced U.S. presence could embolden Turkey to expand its influence in Syria. Turkey has been openly seeking to carve out a permanent role in the Arab country since the collapse of the Assad regime in December. Israel has reportedly warned both Ankara and Washington that any long-term Turkish military presence at strategic Syrian bases would cross a red line.
When we're talking about Turkey, is its very advanced arms industry. Turkey makes drones, Turkey makes missiles. Now, if it starts placing these things, and it also has the S-400, which it bought from Russia, which is one of the most advanced radars, if it starts placing these things on Syrian soil, that's a direct threat to the state of Israel. And I think that's why Israel has drawn these red lines, why it is enforcing these red lines. And we can't ignore the ideological hostility of President Erdogan of Turkey, who only in recent days issued a public prayer calling for the destruction of Israel.
Currently, around 2,000 U.S. troops are stationed across Syria, working alongside local forces to prevent an ISIS resurgence. An American official told Reuters that the number could be cut in half. Meanwhile, the new Arab news outlet reports that a full withdrawal is already underway from the Konoko gas field base in Deir ez-Zor province. According to the report, 2 major convoys have left the base in recent days, headed toward Erbil in Iraq's Kurdish region. The reported pullout comes as U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is conducting a global review of American troop deployments. Earlier this year, Washington issued a list of conditions to Syria's new leadership in exchange for limited sanctions relief. But otherwise, the Trump administration has kept engagement minimal. Some U.S. officials argue for a tougher stance, citing the Syrian leadership's past ties to al-Qaeda. This isn't the first time the U.S. has tried to exit Syria. President Donald Trump announced a full withdrawal during his first term, but ultimately scaled it back. Then, too, Israel feared it would leave a dangerous power vacuum in the region. Now those same fears are resurfacing.
For more, we want to turn now to Michael Mulroy, former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. Mr. Mulroy, thank you so very much for joining us. Well, we really cannot underestimate the significance of this potential move. What do you make of it? What is the goal? What are the chances and what are the somewhat evident risks here?
Good to be with you and your audience. This, of course, went back to the first Trump administration when I was in the Pentagon with this on-again, off-again desire to withdraw U.S. forces. The issues, as you laid out correctly, of course, is the U.S. is key when it comes to our partnership with the SDF in ensuring that ISIS does not return to the region in large numbers and take over terrain. It's the enduring defeat of ISIS mission. But also because the U.S. is there in the past, it helped counter the Iranian presence in Syria. And of course, now that concern with an over-influence of Turkey. And Turkey has had issues with the U.S. connection to the SDF because of the Kurdish YPG part of the SDF. But essentially, it is important to note that it does look like we're not going to withdraw all of our forces, protect about half, which means the U.S. will still maintain a robust presence there, because even if we have just a few troops, that means we're going to have all the air cover, for example. But ultimately, from my perspective, it's important the United States stays in Syria, both for our own national security objectives, but also those of our partner countries.
Mr. Mulroy, zooming out for a second, because it all comes while the U.S. is holding talks with Iran, saying that a military option is still very much on the table. So isn't this decision to get out of Syria somewhat weakens this threat vis-a-vis Iran separately?
Yes, you could make that argument for sure, because Iran would like to see us get out of Syria. They would like to see us get out of many places that we are.
And
one of the exactly, and out of Iraq as well. Hopefully, I don't think it is. I think there is a desire inside the current administration to withdraw forces from all sorts of places around the world, and it's not connected to some kind of appeasement to Iran in those negotiations. The military option, as President Trump has said, is still on the table, and I think we're actually postured militarily to carry that out if need be right now. But hopefully, this had nothing to do with negotiations that were in Oman and are going to be in Rome this weekend, because it's in the U.S. interest to stay there, and it's against the Iranian influence, if I could say it that way, for the U.S. to stay in Syria.
Yeah, there's never a void here in the Middle East, that's for certain. So when someone or something is getting out, something or someone else is getting in. And to that point, Mr. Mulroy, before we thank you for your time, if we could pass a note on your behalf to the Israeli government, what should Israel do? Contacts with Turkey aren't moving at the moment. And even if they do, would that be enough to secure Israeli security and as a result, to maintain the American interest in the region?
Well, I certainly think Israel has a lot of influence on the United States, as they should. You are one of our key partners in the region, and really explaining in detail why it's important for the U.S. to maintain our presence in Syria. Again, we're there under the authority of fighting ISIS, which we are doing, but it has all sorts of secondary positive effects for the United States to ensure Iran does not regain a foothold there, to threaten our partner countries in the region, to include Israel. It's very important that happens. Also, Jordan doesn't want to see the U.S. depart, and we have bases down near there that I think are very key, both to the security of Jordan and Israel. I think it's really explaining why, and it's also important to note that U.S. servicemen and women aren't directly in harm's way there. We are a partner, we are enabling a partner, and we are not losing troops. This is not something that has been, I think, talked about enough.
Mr. Michael Mulroy, former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, thank you so much, sir, for your time. We appreciate it, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
I-24 News correspondent Alec Pollard joining us now here in studio. So we briefly mentioned the Israeli standpoint. definitely a major concern here.
All this upheaval that's been happening in Syria since the fall of the Assad regime has presented a lot of opportunities, but also dangers for Israel. So this fundamentalist Shia axis that Iran led has crumbled very much because of the blows that Hezbollah took in the war and the fall of Assad, but it is potentially being replaced with a Sunni fundamentalist axis that could threaten Israel, with Ahmed al-Shara, the president of Syria, who is a former al-Qaeda member and now being backed by Turkey, and Erdogan, who is ideologically kind of showing some of those tendencies. So all of that potentially could be countered by a U.S. presence, by a larger U.S. presence. Also, the minorities that Israel has been trying to make common cause with in Syria, being the Kurds and the Druze, having the U.S. presence there helps them with that. There is also, though, potentially an opportunity for Israel to try to have some type of direct contact with the al-Shara regime. It's a line or a tactic that Israel has not really pursued. It's more pursued the tactic of deterrence and trying to have connections with the Kurds and with the Druze, but it is something that maybe Israel could consider. But all of these sort of more positive...
We also seen these contacts did not bear much fruit at this point in time between Israel and Turkey in Azerbaijan. So this is another route of action potential.
Right, a way of deconflicting and making sure that Syria doesn't make use of various bases of the Assad regime, and also the ability for Israel to strike various militias that could rise in Syria. Shara's hold on Syria is still very weak. He's just taking control of the country. There still are armed groups and weapons
it is all still happening.
Yes, that could threaten Israel, and Israel wants to have the ability to strike those. But all of these things is easier. It's easier for Israel to do, and it has more of a backing to do when there is a larger U.S. presence there. President Trump, though, he has made it one of his goals to reduce the U.S. spending and the U.S. Military and presence on these forever wars, as they're called in the U.S.
All over the world, by the way, not just here in the Middle East.
Of course. And an Israeli attempt to try to reverse this decision would be very difficult to do. There is a lot of support domestically for Trump to pull out forces and for Israel to...
The Middle Eastern quagmire, you want to get out, but they pull you back in, right? Time
for sure.
After time. All right, from one neighbor to another, onto the foiled terror plot in Jordan now. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met earlier today with Jordanian Prime Minister and Defense Minister Jafar Hassan against the backdrop of this terror infrastructure the Kingdom Intelligence Service unveiled. So for more, we want to turn now to Washington, D.C. Bashar Jarrar, Jordanian-American political analyst, media consultant. Thank you very much, Mr. Jarrar, for joining us. Well, the Kingdom still shaken by this revelation yesterday. What can you say? What can you tell us? What can we say generally?
Well, Ali, you mentioned in a previous interview about the vacuum. How dangerous is this vacuum in the Middle East when it comes to security? Now, what's going on in Jordan is very relevant to what's going on in the whole region. Obviously, that among the consequences of the terrible event that took place in October the 7th, 23. Obviously, that was abused by so many political factors and militant Islam in particular. There is a kind of duality in Jordan when it comes to who is representing the mainstream of Islamists. It is the Ikhwan, which is something more of like a very tolerant approach to deal with it for several reasons. Mainly because they are considered to be moderate. And on the other hand, there is the political wing of the same mentality, same doctrine as Jabhat al-Amal al-Islami, which is an Islamic front that is almost fifth of the parliament, Jordanian parliament. So the shock was for the public opinion in Jordan that now, for the first time, Ikhwan is involved in a terrorist plot. And it is 4 groups. So something that is so complicated, it was developed since 2021. That meaning that it has nothing to do with what was going on in Gaza.
Right.
And that was exploited by these kind of militant Ikhwan Muslimin movement, to the extent that now it is threatening not only neighboring Israel, it is threatening domestically Jordan. And for that reason, it is believed that it will not stop here. There is something now, and it is in the public sphere. Everyone is discussing this. Should we, as like the government, the regime, should we react only to these four groups and to Ikhwan, or this should include the political party, which is a part of the parliament, and how this will affect the fate of the current parliament?
So Mr. Jarrar, the assertion you're making is extremely important here. And my question to you is, it sinking in? Because you're saying that it is to an extent disconnected from the Gaza war, from Israel, from any exterior cause, but rather has to do with an internal threat in Jordan to the fate, to a disability of the Hashemite kingdom. Is this message sinking in?
I believe it is all goes back to Iran. And Iran was trying to establish a kind of militancy in different countries.
Right.
It was always stopped when it comes to Jordan. Jordan is very unique in its intelligence and security capabilities, in addition to the kind of nationalistic support to the king as a symbol of stability in the kingdom. For that reason, what happened since the fall of Hamas, of Hezbollah, and the fall of Assad regime, it was obvious now that it was not only a kind of a reaction to the turmoil in the region, it's more of kind of opportunistic approach to utilize that Iranian support and to try to be a part of it. And this is all back to the ambitions of those Islamists to be a part of the government, or maybe at a certain point to try to do what they did in Syria, in Egypt. And this is, for that reason, it's very serious what's going on.
And you're saying it is only the very beginning. Bashar Jarrar, Jordanian-American political analyst and media consultant. Thank you very much for this illuminating interview. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lee.
Alec Pollard back with you here in studio. So following what Mr. Jarrar was just saying, obviously Jordan has its own internal security concerns, but I hear here potential cooperation with Israel on the matter, security speaking.
Definitely many of the threats that Israel face are things that could destabilize Jordan. It's been like that for many decades. You go back to Black September in the 1970s when the PLO were trying to make a state within a state in Jordan. And the Hashemite kingdom is a minority inside Jordan, the Hashemite family and so forth. And there are people who are particularly either Islamic or very loyal to the Palestinian cause, that they might see Jordan as being disrupting that. And that's kind of the delicate dance that always the kingdom there has to play into, and the threat from the Iranian axis as well. There is that security cooperation that goes on between Israel and Jordan, and there's also the U.S. involvement at all times. But the relations between Israel and Jordan have gone very much downhill in recent years in the friction between Netanyahu and King Abdallah that makes it difficult to find common ground on some of these issues.
And yet sustainable. So for the time being, that might be enough. Alec Pollard, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're moving on to this now, the spiking tension between France and Algeria. Paris recalling its ambassador after both countries expelled each other's diplomats. This following France's arrest of an Algerian consular official linked to an alleged kidnap. So how far will it all go? Welcoming now Mr. Emmanuel Dupois, president of the Institute of Perspective and Security in Europe. Thank you very much, Mr. Dupois, for joining us tonight. So before we discuss what is currently unfolding and what is to happen, if you will recap the events for us, how did we get here?
Well, first of all, it started a few months ago with the arrestation of a prominent writer, Bouham Sansal, who has been arrested the day he has arrived in Algeria. and he has been kept hostage. And this is the way that France is considering this issue. And this started to kick off a tension which can be related to the decision of Emmanuel Macron to recognize the Moroccanity of the Sahara when he wrote a letter saying that to the King Mohammed VI the 13th of July. And things kept going on worse and worse, with already two convocation of the French ambassador, Stéphane Romaté, by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with a certain number of polemica here in France, fueling a certain number of tensions with Algeria. And of course, as you mentioned, the fact that now Algeria has took one step forward. And this is very awkward because a few days ago, the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jean-Noël Barrot, was in Algiers, and things would have been considered to be going on a best track, on a better track than it is today.
Well, and then reality hits, as we put it. So we've seen this crisis deepening and deepening. Could it escalate further, or are we at the boiling point of the event?
Well, already we cannot expel the Algerian ambassador, since there hasn't been an Algerian ambassador for a few months. So we cannot do this reciprocity. You rightly mentioned the fact that Algeria kicked out 12 of our diplomats working on security and anti-terrorism cooperation, which of course is again very difficult to understand. And France has done this diplomatic reciprocity, calling back 12 of his former diplomats. So what would be the next step? Well, first of all, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jean-Noël Barrot, and his counterpart, Ahmed Hafez, have called for a mutual reboot of our diplomatic relations, because now we cannot go further than the cut of our diplomatic ties, which of course would imply a very tense relation with the Algerians, the more or less 2 to 3 million Algerians working and living in France. So the question would be, of course, not only on the diplomatic arena, but also take in consideration the impact it can have on the internal domestic policy.
Of course. So, an unfolding crisis that hopefully will not metastasize into something much greater than the current state. Emmanuel Dupois, President of the Institute of Perspective and Security in Europe, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now to this, the United States has approved an arms sale totaling $825 million to Morocco. Yes, we're staying on topic to an extent, as the North African nation hosts the largest multinational military exercise in Africa. And our Alexa Schloss has all the report.
The largest U.S.-led military exercise in Africa has kicked off, showcasing more than 10,000 troops from over 40 nations and spanning across 4 countries. Dubbed African Lion, the joint military exercise organized by U.S. African Command, which debuted in 2004, will see its largest iteration this year, with events including field training exercises, airborne and amphibious operations, special forces operations, HIMARS rapid insertion, humanitarian civic assistance, and medical readiness engagements. New capabilities in the cyberspace and on next-generation weapons will also be tested.
We know that at the present time there are problems in the Sahel with the Islamists. There are problems, obviously, as we know, the war in the Middle East, but there are also problems in North Africa, in Libya, and other countries. So this is a very important military exercise with the United States at the helm.
Algeria was rumored to participate in this year's drill, but in the end didn't appear on the list of participants, which is unsurprising given the poor relations it holds with several participant and host nations, including Morocco, France, and Israel. Another notable country present at the exercise is Qatar. While only present as an observer nation, it has raised some eyebrows in Israel over the Gulf nation's role.
We all understand that Qatar is, at the end of the day, despite its machinations, ultimately a hostile state for the state of Israel. It is supporting Islamist ideology. So for it to be there as an observer at the same place as, the Israeli Air Force is is participating in. It's problematic from an image perspective. I don't think it's problematic from an information security perspective.
Meanwhile, the U.S. has approved the sale of $825 million worth of Stinger missiles to Morocco to, quote, support the foreign policy and national security of the United States by helping to improve the security of a major non-NATO ally that continues to be an important force for political stability and economic progress in North Africa. Recent years has seen a global surge in the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, including by the Western Sahara militant Polisario Front, which the Stinger missiles will help combat. At the same time, U.S. House Republicans seek to designate the front a terrorist entity.
I agree with Secretary Rubio. Genuine autonomy under Moroccan sovereignty is the only feasible solution for the Sahara. I will introduce legislation to designate the Polisario as terrorists. Iran and Putin gaining a foothold in Africa via Polisario. Connect the dots. Axis of aggression.
Amid uncertainty surrounding U.S. foreign policy under the new Trump administration, the continuity of major annual multinational exercises appear unaffected and larger than ever.
And as we speak, there's still a massive sandstorm in Iraq, but we want to take a closer look now into Iraqi palm tree business. Yes, suffering greatly from numerous wars. The country is now seeing a boom in palm tree planting. So numbers are soaring with renewed efforts. More in this next report.
In Iraq's Karbala, palm tree fields are being revitalized as part of a national effort to restore the country's agricultural sector. The war between Iraq and Iran, fought between 1980 and 1988, took its toll on the Iraqi trees.
The circumstances of the Iran-Iraq war and the concentration of many battles in the southern provinces led to the destruction and elimination of numbers or entire palm forests in a way that reflected on the number of palm trees in Iraq. Then, the circumstances after the fall of the regime, the security instability and the preoccupation of the states with important files and topics related to the security aspects facing Al-Qaeda and Islamic State led to the neglect of this large agricultural sector and encouraged the weak-willed to destroy other palm forests in many provinces.
But efforts are underway to plant large number of palm trees, including both traditional Iraqi varieties and imported types. Many companies and projects are heavily investing in this sector. One of them is the Fadak Palm Farm, who acts as a genetic bank, preserving various palm species and expanding its plantation significantly.
The total area of the farm is 2,000 Iraqi dunams, over 5 million square feet. This area can accommodate 54,000 palm trees. We have currently reached more than 30,000 palm trees.
This is it from us. Nicole Tzedek will be right here with the rundown in a couple of minutes. Thanks for watching.
Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il. How do you get your news? How do you know what sources to trust? And to paint a clear picture of the entire story, you need a breakdown of the constant stream of events, top stories, expert analysts, and the best journalists bringing you real voices on the ground. We're breaking it all down on The Rundown. Get the facts, stay informed, and be a voice of reason for the Middle East.
Gyűlölet kezés alapjog!
Justice Department seized nearly $200,000 worth of cryptocurrency from the Hamas terror group. Our senior U.S. correspondent speaks with the interim U.S. attorney for D.C. about this legal bid against Hamas. The United States is reportedly planning to withdraw troops from Syria, sparking Israeli concern that Turkey could gain a stronger foothold. We have the details. And the International Court of Justice is delaying proceedings on South Africa's genocide case against Israel after South Africa tried to submit evidence in a backdoor way. We speak to a law professor about the legal proceedings. This is the rundown on I-24 News. I'm Nicole Zedek. Thanks for joining us this evening. While U.S. President Donald Trump's administration works on chasing out Hamas supporters from college campuses and deporting non-citizens for cheering on the terror group, the Justice Department is using the full force of the law against Hamas. The United States Justice Department has seized roughly $195,000 worth of cryptocurrency straight from the wallets of Hamas. Court documents state the Hamas terror group used websites, social media accounts, and email addresses to provide supporters around the world with a changing set of cryptocurrency addresses where those Hamas supporters were encouraged to donate money that Hamas then laundered. Hamas laundered more than $1.3 million in virtual currency since October 2024. That's according to the Justice Department. Well, interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Ed Martin, chatted with our senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim this morning about his continuing personal pursuit of Hamas. Mike is joining us now live from the U.S. outside the U.S. Justice Department. Mike, what have you learned from your conversation so far?
This is an ongoing process here for the U.S. Justice Department. There's been concern within the halls of Congress, not only within the Trump administration, but other levers of government about Hamas's abilities to sustain its finances through cryptocurrency. There was a Congressional Research Service report about this last year, even before President Trump took over the White House once again, about needing to crack down on this type of terror financing. Beyond that, as you mentioned, the Trump administration administration has been pursuing Hamas from all corners, including just a couple of weeks ago, the same U.S. Attorney Ed Martin from the District of Columbia getting a 10-day sentence for a vandal for Hamas who defaced a statue outside of Union Station here in Washington, D.C. during Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit here to the district last year to address a joint session of Congress. We were able to catch up with Ed Martin, who rarely talks to the media but is quite prolific on social media, about these cryptocurrency and vandalism cases, the overall effort against Hamas and other terror groups that are working against Israel, and why he seems to be so personally involved in these efforts. Here's our one-on-one earlier today with the interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Ed Martin. Mr. Martin, you got time for a few quick questions? Mike Wagenheim with I-24 News. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Happy to talk to you.
I wanted to ask you here about Hamas and the prosecutorial efforts here of your office. We've seen a conviction in terms of the vandalizing of a statue outside of Union Station, cryptocurrency prosecution in effect right now. What's your stance? What's your priority in terms of prosecuting Hamas?
Well, let me say one thing about this situation at Union Station. When we saw that case, if you looked at what was spray painted on this incredible, iconic monument, it said Hamas is coming. And the message was not a message of peace or protest. It was a message of hate. It was a threat. And what we said is we will prosecute Hamas if they come. And in this case, we prosecuted Hamas, the person who did that, and we made him pay for it. We made him go to jail. We made him fix it. And we're going to do that every place we can. You mentioned cryptocurrency. Some of the sophisticated way, terrorists are not, they think they're smarter than they are, but they're not really dumb. In this case, they thought they were being clever, and they had cryptocurrency they were using. Well, we caught them, we stopped it, and we made sure that it was seized and it was away from them. So my message, coming through Union Station where that violence was on this monument, 100,000 people come through every day. In fact, many of them work on the Hill and they work around. Those folks deserve to be safe. They deserve to not be threatened, and we're going to stop that. So the message to these people that say Hamas is coming, you come to D.C., you're going to go to jail is what you're going to do, and we're proud of that.
The Trump administration is using, it seems, the full weight of its power here, whether it's the Education Department, whether it's out of the White House, the State Department, what have you, to ensure that Hamas is run out of power. What more can the Justice Department do to ensure that that goal is met as well?
Well, you're right. The president had an EO on anti-Semitism. He signed it right away. The Justice Department formed a task force. Leo Terrell is the lead of it, and he's actually asked us to be a part of that. So he's going to campuses. Look, nearby where we are is Georgetown University Law School. We're not going to let Columbia University come to Washington, D.C. We're not going to let Georgetown turn into Columbia University in terms of the chaos and the hate that's spewed. It's not going to happen. And President Trump was clear from the beginning. We are going to be aggressive in protecting D.C., protecting our citizens, and protecting America from terror like Hamas.
I wanted to ask you about this cryptocurrency that was seized by the Justice Department here in cooperation with some other agencies. Has there been anybody prosecuted, any individuals that you're planning to prosecute at this point in time, or is it still developing case?
It's still developing, and actually what I was thinking as we started talking is there's a number of cases that have to do with Hamas that I can't talk about that are ongoing. I can say that, yes, we stopped the currency flowing. Yes, there are some bad actors. We're going to get them. I hope in that case. There's also a number of other cases that we've opened that have to do with Hamas. My office here in Washington, D.C., this U.S. Attorney's Office, has cases all over the world because of the jurisdiction we have, and including cases that relate overseas. And so, again, once you realize, I don't know what the Biden administration and my predecessor was doing. They didn't believe that Hamas was a terror organization. Once you know that, you have to change your behavior to hold people accountable, and that's what we're doing.
This seems, based on my readings of your tweets and other social media posting, this seems like a personal mission for you. Why does it seem so personal?
Well, There's a couple of reasons. Years ago, I actually worked for John Paul II, Pope John Paul II, and he had this incredible, outreach to the Jewish community in Rome, when I was working for him, I was in Rome, and that was kind of an opening to this sort of. I happen to be Catholic, to the faith community. Where our Jewish brethren, they're our brothers and sisters in the faith, and so. But I came out of St. Louis, and in St. Louis, that's where I'm from. In St. Louis, there were some great Jewish leaders that I worked with on issues, and I learned to understand the hate that is Hamas and the hate that is a threat to Israel. It's not a fight over nations. It's a fight over who people are and who the Jewish faithful are. And so I take it very personally. I take it personally in the way that I take attacks on my own faith. I find that a feeling in my gut. It makes a difference.
Mr. Martin, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Certainly sounds like Ed Martin and the U.S. District Attorney for the District of Columbia has taken a strong stance when it comes to Hamas. Mike Wagenheim, thank you for your journalism and uncovering exactly what the State Department is going after right now. Now to news out of the region. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz is clarifying earlier statements about possibly resuming aid to Gaza, saying right now Israel has no plan to renew the flow of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. Katz says preventing aid is one of the main tools being used to pressure Hamas to reach a hostage release deal. The defense minister did clarify plans to establish a mechanism using civilian companies to transfer humanitarian aid so Hamas won't have access to supplies in the future. Well, joining me in studio for further analysis, I'm joined by security analyst Jonathan Regev, as well as Dan Perry, international affairs analyst and former Europe and Middle East editor for the Associated Press. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us on the rundown this evening. Now, Dan, when it comes to these statements coming from the defense minister, this issue of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, he states that they're going to establish some civilian companies to help with those aid deliveries. But how long does something like that take? Because as it stands right now, it seems these civilian companies won't be coming in as long as Hamas is still in power and threatens those civilian companies.
It's an absolute catch-22 because it's reasonable for Israel to demand that the aid reach its intended recipients and not be hijacked by Hamas and used by Hamas to maintain its control of Gaza and denied to many of the people in Gaza which it's meant to aid, which Hamas does. Hamas hijacks the aid, absolutely. On the other hand, there's no perfect way to do it. It will take a long time. It may take forever to come up with a civilian alternative to what we've seen before. Israel's really between a rock and a hard place because it cannot be seen internationally as using the aid as leverage for a political or military strategic purpose, which implies that it's willing to cause damage and in a collective punishment way to the population. That, in fact, is illegal under international law. When Israel tries to say, well, it's Hamas's fault for behaving as they do, it's true, but it's far from likely that this would absolve it from the legal consequences, because there's no doubt Hamas is a terrorist group and an international outlaw. That's a given. Israel is not generally in the business of lowering itself to that level. So it is problematic when Israeli officials suggest that turning the aid on and off, which is a humanitarian issue, is somehow a strategic leverage thing for them, because that, if that were the case, it would absolutely be illegal. How to fix the problem is a genuine dilemma, because Hamas has been known to shoot at people bringing in the aid. Certainly it's been known to hijack the aid. Once it has the aid, it distributes it in a way that is absolutely not fair and egalitarian and humanitarian. So simply part of the ongoing disaster.
So you have to eliminate Hamas, and it seems to be able to continue with these safer terms of humanitarian aid deliveries.
Nothing will work well until Hamas is gone.
That seems at least the messaging coming from Israel as well. Something else we heard from the defense minister as part of this different pressure being put on Hamas. He says the pressure on Hamas is heavy. Tensions between the group and local population is also rising. Now, Jonathan, this is also something that we saw in weeks past. Are we seeing more signs as far as the internal unrest of different populations inside Gaza also speaking out because that also goes hand in hand with the humanitarian situation.
Is there internal unrest in Gaza? Yes. Is it something that will bring Hamas down? I would guess no, because it's not something that is strong enough, and there's no other power other than Hamas which is strong enough in the Gaza Strip to stand up and support these protesters and eventually topple Hamas down. It's not even close to being similar to what we saw in 2007 when Hamas took over from the Palestinian Authority, because Hamas was very strong at the time, and it also had a popular support within the Strip. This is not the situation now. Israel, of course, is hoping that this combination of military pressure, which is putting putting on Hamas's military wing, and the civilian pressure being put on Hamas's civilian wing, will altogether either. I don't think anyone is under the illusion that this will topple down Hamas, but perhaps put enough pressure for Hamas to concede and go into some kind of an agreement which is easier, more comfortable for Israel, on more comfortable terms for Israel. This perhaps is what drew Hamas to the negotiating table a few weeks ago, but we're seeing, at least publicly by Hamas, saying that the offer now on the table by Israel is not something good enough. Therefore, it's probably not good enough. On the previous issue that you spoke about, I read the statement coming by Israel Katz, which created a lot of fuss in the Israeli politics.
Back and forth.
Exactly, especially on the right side of the Israeli political spectrum. Never did it say, we, Israel, we are getting humanitarian aid back to Gaza. It does not say that. It does say, in the future, Israel would want, with the help of some kind of civilian organizations, to bring aid back into Gaza in order for it, exactly as was mentioned, not to fall into the hands of Hamas. But what was all the criticism on Israel Katz? I simply do not understand, because after the criticism, I went back to the statement, read it again and again. Never did it say Israel is putting back humanitarian aid to Gaza. It doesn't say that. Now, are all these people criticizing the defense minister? Do they want Israel to hold humanitarian aid forever? Probably not. All those people would want, I think, to find some kind of a mechanism to bring aid back into Gaza, but for it not to falling into the hands of Hamas. How to do that? I think it was said here. It may take forever.
Jonathan, I have to say, a lot of this political criticism of Israel Katz, who was right in this case, and he was a voice of reason in this case, comes for political reasons.
And even from within his own party.
They will seize the opportunity to pretend he said something he didn't, because they don't want any humanitarian aid to ever go in. They seem unaware of the fact that in taking that position, they are putting themselves on they're buying a one-way ticket to The Hague, because, as I said before, that is illegal. One last thing, it is important what the actual situation is in Gaza. Israel doesn't owe Gaza free food, but where the humanitarian thing kicks in is if there's near starvation in Gaza, which is why, interestingly, Israel, in order to, well, maybe because it's true, but also in order to clarify that it's not foregoing its responsibility, international law claims that there's plenty of food in Gaza. Hamas, ironically, is claiming that everything is at near starvation levels. If that were true, then the leverage might actually have worked better, because there would be actual desperation.
All shows the complexities when it does come to the issue, and it seems that's exactly why the defense minister is coming up with possibly a solution for the future. Gentlemen, stay with us. We're going to continue to move on to some other news of the day. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group, they released a propaganda video of hostage Rom Broslavsky. This is the first sign of life received of Rom since former hostage Sasha Trofanov was released, and said that he had met Broslavsky in PIJ captivity. Broslavsky was working as a security guard at the Nova Music Festival when he was abducted on October 7th, 2023. He was 19 at the time. He's now 21 years old after spending 558 days in terror captivity. The family has approved the publication of the video.
כל היום אני רק מגרד, וכל היום כואב לי, כולי, אני לא יודע מה זה המחלה הזאת. חלאס, חלאס. בבקשה ממך, אדוני ראש הממשלה, בבקשה. תוציא אותי מחובה. טראמפ, איפה אתה? איפה ההבטחות שלך? לא אמרת לנו לשחרר את כולם בעסקה?
Earlier today, our I-24 News anchor, Ellie Hockenberg, she spoke with Rom's brother, Amit, after seeing the sign of life video from Rom for the first time in 18 months. Here's just part of that interview.
We feel the same way he does, the way he looks in the video. That's how we are feeling since October 7th. There's no change. We're very, very hurt. On the one hand, it's good to see the sign of life from him, from the brother I miss so much. But on the other hand, you see how much he hurts. You see how helpless he is, in a situation where you can't do anything, and the heart is simply broken.
It's this mixture of emotions for that family right now. For the latest, we want to go live now to our I-24 news correspondent, Balik Sladin, at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. Balik, this is just the latest of the psychological abuse released from these terror groups in Gaza. What is the reaction that you're seeing from Hostages Square? What more can you even tell us about Rome?
Yes, Ram definitely was one of the heroes of the massacre that happened in the Nova Festival during October 7th. He helped many people survive that attack, but ultimately and unfortunately, of course, he was kidnapped by the Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, and is held captive until now. And this is the first time, as you've mentioned, that the family gets the chance to see him in a video speaking to the camera. He is alive. He's not well, of course, according to what we have heard from him, and he's demanding his release as soon as possible. We know that we had a sign of life from him, actually, from Sasha Trupanov about 2 months ago when he was returned in the last deal, and now we see him in this video. Now, the efforts are being made to bring him and the rest back, of course, but of course Israel has its own red lines. We see that the Israeli government is yet to give up on the first goal of this war, which is the complete eradication of Hamas and the other Palestinian faction, the Gaza Strip. They are demanding for the first time, that's included in the latest proposal by the Egyptian, the issue of complete disarmament. And although we still don't have any official response from Hamas, they are saying that they will respond in 48 hours. That was 2 days ago, so we suppose to see maybe an official response in the coming hours, or maybe as early as tomorrow. But a lot of indication by Hamas's senior officials, and also some briefing to many media outlets in the Arab world and also to the BBC, that they will reject this current offer because it includes the issue of complete disarmament. And that's why the families of the hostages are very angry with the government. Today they issued a statement about the statement that the defense minister has said, but in general they are calling what the government is aiming for a fantasy, because Hamas will not disarm. They are, of course, calling for the immediate release of the Israeli hostages, even if that means the end of the war.
I-24 News correspondent Balik Sladin live from Hostages Square with the latest updates. Thank you for your coverage. Now, the United States military is planning a partial withdrawal from Syria. That's according to Israeli security officials to I-24 News. But Israel is sounding the alarm, warning the move could strengthen Turkey's hold on Syrian territory and threaten Israel's security. This report was first revealed by military analyst Yossi Yehoshua from our I-24 News Hebrew channel. Here's more.
The United States is preparing to withdraw a significant number of troops from Syria. I-24 News Hebrew channel's military analyst Yossi Yehoshua has learned that the Pentagon recently informed Israeli defense officials it plans to gradually reduce its military footprint in Syria over the next 2 months. But the decision is raising serious concerns in Israel. A senior Israeli official told I-24 News the country is working to persuade Washington to reconsider, warning that a reduced U.S. presence could embolden Turkey to expand its influence in Syria. Turkey has been openly seeking to carve out a permanent role in the Arab country since the collapse of the Assad regime in December. Israel has reportedly warned both Ankara and Washington that any long-term Turkish military presence at strategic Syrian bases would cross a red line.
When we're talking about Turkey, is its very advanced arms industry. Turkey makes drones, Turkey makes missiles. Now, if it starts placing these things, and it also has the S-400, which it bought from Russia, which is one of the most advanced radars, if it starts placing these things on Syrian soil, that's a direct threat to the state of Israel. And I think that's why Israel has drawn these red lines, why it is enforcing these red lines. And we can't ignore the ideological hostility of President Erdogan of Turkey, who only in recent days issued a public prayer calling for the destruction of Israel.
Currently, around 2,000 U.S. troops are stationed across Syria, working alongside local forces to prevent an ISIS resurgence. An American official told Reuters that the number could be cut in half. Meanwhile, the New Arab news outlet reports that a full withdrawal is already underway from the Konoko gas field base in Deir ez-Zor province. According to the report, 2 major convoys have left the base in recent days, headed toward Erbil in Iraq's Kurdish region. The reported pullout comes as U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is conducting a global review of American troop deployments. Earlier this year, Washington issued a list of conditions to Syria's new leadership in exchange for limited sanctions relief. But otherwise, the Trump administration has kept engagement minimal. Some U.S. officials argue for a tougher stance, citing the Syrian leadership's past ties to al-Qaeda. This isn't the first time the U.S. has tried to exit Syria. President Donald Trump announced a full withdrawal during his first term, but ultimately scaled it back. Then, too, Israel feared it would leave a dangerous power vacuum in the region. Now those same fears are resurfacing.
Coming back here in studio, I'm still joined by Jonathan Regev and Dan Perry. Now, Dan, we did see plans like this during Trump's first term in office, so it's not necessarily coming as a surprise during Trump's second term in office that he wants to go through with withdrawing, at least right now, a phased withdrawal, limiting the number of U.S. troops in Syria. We know the concern for Israel, but from even the American perspective, why have troops been there in the first place? What are they securing in the region?
The troops basically are seen as the protectors of the Kurdish area. The Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces control the eastern part of Turkey, of Syria, and that's residual from the war against ISIS. And they played a very positive role in the war against ISIS, and they were critical in basically expunging ISIS from Syria. The Americans prevent their presence there, which is very small numbers, but their very presence there prevents Turkey from overrunning the Kurdish areas. Turkey sees no difference between the Syrian Kurds and the Kurds across the border, the PKK, which it considers a terrorist group. It would love to wipe them out. It can't do that as long as there are U.S. troops, even in small numbers, in the area, and that's why when Trump originally tried to remove all U.S. troops from Syria in 2018, 2019, there was an uproar by people in his administration who cared about things like, protecting our allies. That was back when Trump version 1.0 was surrounded by normative figures like, James Mattis and Rex Harrison and so forth. That's not the case so much right now. And Trump is a man of a day fix. He is no surprise that it comes back. It's not necessarily ridiculous of Trump to hate, as he does, forever wars where the U.S. gets sucked into a country and stays there for a decade. He wants to end that. And I would not be surprised if he doesn't much care what happens to the Kurds. Now, beyond that, Trump has a sort of simpatico with Erdogan, who's an elected authoritarian. I think Trump would like to be one as well. And it's no secret that they have a friendly relationship. For Israel, it may not be so terrible. For Israel, the issue here, as it usually is for Israel, is what's the least bad option? A chaotic Syria that does not have a strong country and NATO power as the force behind the throne may not necessarily be better. Regime in Syria.
There have been a lot of changes since Trump's first term in office, and so even from Israel's perspective, the threat of Turkey coming in there, they've already been trying to limit that, Jonathan.
Yes, and relations between Jerusalem and Ankara, it's no secret, are not the best, to say the least. And therefore, Israel is quite concerned that Turkey will be the main power calling the shots in Syria. At the moment, or at least up until a few months ago, until the end of the Assad regime, it was Russia, and Israel had a relatively good understanding with Russia that allowed Israel to do almost everything that it wanted in Syria's skies. We saw time and time again, way before the war began, since 2015, pretty much, almost for a decade, Israel acting in Syrian skies almost without any interference and with good coordination with Russia. I think that apart from one incident in which a Russian cargo plane, I think it was taken down by anti-aircraft fire, usually it worked out good. Will it work so good with Turkey? Not not so sure.
That is the question at hand, exactly. What will work out good and what is in Israel's best interest? We'll certainly have to be monitoring that. Jonathan Regev, Dan Perry, thank you for joining us for this latest edition of The Rundown. We're going up for a quick break here for just 3 minutes. When we come back, we're going to go to the Netherlands, The Hague, during the ICJ's most recent bid to delay the International Criminal Court's justice proceedings. Stay with us here on I-24 News. Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il.
Introducing the brand new i24 News video on demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions and expert commentary, all at your fingertips whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News video on demand app today. The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on i24 News. Introducing the brand new i24 News video on demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions and expert commentary, all at your fingertips whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News video on demand app today.
Welcome back to The Rundown. I-24 News has learned that the International Court of Justice in The Hague is postponing proceedings in South Africa's genocide case against Israel for 6 months. Two Western diplomats told I-24 News the delay comes after South Africa tried to submit evidence accusing Israel of genocide without giving Israel access to look over the materials. Israel submitted rejections regarding procedural violations and lack of transparency, and got the deadline to respond to South Africa's claims pushed back from July 2025 until January 2026. For more, we're joined now by Professor Eugene Kantorovich, a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, and as well as the director of International Law Department at Cohelet Policy Forum. Professor Eugene, thanks for being with us on The Rundown this evening.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, South Africa right now trying to possibly go behind Israel's back in these legal proceedings. As far as this latest move, what should we make of it as these procedures are now pushed back for 6 months?
I wouldn't get too excited about it. With the ICJ case against Israel, the process is the punishment. The ICJ, famously can take 5, 10, even 15 years to decide a case. So the point of such a case is really to have a 5, 10, 15-year period where South Africa and critics of Israel can say, there's a genocide case against Israel in The Hague. And to people who don't know better, that will sound impressive. I expect the ICJ to issue more delays and to actually try to stall this proceeding because, politically, they don't want to find against Israel because that would anger the Trump administration, and they can't dismiss the charges because that would anger much of the international legal community with whom they hang out. So they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and they're likely to kick the can down the road at least 4 years.
Well, but with this move, it was Israel who submitted the rejections when it comes to this quote-unquote lack of transparency from South Africa. So what was Israel aiming for then with these submissions?
Right. So I think Israel wants to point out that South Africa is engaging in really improper tactics. And, what's the point of presenting evidence without letting Israel respond to it? Namely, it's bad evidence, fake evidence, which they don't want Israel to have the opportunity to debunk. And much of the evidence they have introduced has been of this nature. For example, uncritically relying on fake Hamas casualty numbers. Indeed, almost all the facts behind the alleged genocide accusation have been falling apart one by one, including, claims of starvation, but we don't see the people starving, Hamas casualty figures, which even Hamas has since admitted were fake. So South Africa wants this to go on without really having the basic aspects of a court proceeding, of having the other side confront the evidence.
Without actually having to show it once it comes to those quote-unquote evidence, as you mentioned. I'm curious if the ongoing war impacts this case as well when you talk about what the South Africa has been trying to present when it comes to Israel's military operations inside Gaza. Those military operations, they do continue. So how does a country like Israel then build its case on its military operations as the war is still ongoing?
I think it's a terrible mistake for Israel to try to defend itself before this court, which really properly has no jurisdiction. They invented basically the premises for their own jurisdiction, where there's no credible allegations of genocide. And it's a clear abuse of the Genocide Convention. I think instead of trying to defend itself, because again, the process is the punishment. It's the fact of the case hanging over Israel's head that what South Africa is looking for. Israel should both reject participation in these obviously biased proceedings and instead withdraw from the jurisdiction of the ICJ, which it can do. Right? Israel has chosen to give ICJ jurisdiction in the Genocide Convention. America does not do that. For example, the United States and dozens of other countries say even under the Genocide Convention, the ICJ has no jurisdiction, and Israel should join those countries so that this does not happen again.
Interesting indeed. Professor Eugene Kontorovich joining us with the latest analysis on these possibly delayed for a much longer time, it sounds like, proceedings when it comes to the South Africa case. Thanks for joining us on The Rundown.
Thanks so much.
Now, the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, he visited Iran today and said the IAEA should be involved in the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks that started in Oman. Grossi said, without us, any agreement on Iran is just a piece of paper. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, he talked about what Tehran is willing and not willing to give in when it comes to the ongoing nuclear talks, and said halting enrichment is not negotiable. Araghchi's statements follow the back-and-forth comments coming from U.S. Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff, who first said a deal could see Iran go back to 3.67% uranium enrichment, but then wrote on social media, Iran must stop and eliminate its nuclear enrichment and weaponization program. Here's what the Iranian foreign minister had to say today.
What is certain is that Iran's enrichment program is a real, accepted matter. We are prepared to build trust and address any potential concerns, but the core issue of enrichment itself is not negotiable. As I mentioned, we've heard conflicting and contradictory positions during this time. Mr. Steve Witkoff has made several different statements. The real positions will become clear at the negotiating table. In my opinion, this kind of approach will not help a proper negotiation process. However, we still need to learn their actual stance during the negotiation session. If they come with constructive positions, I am hopeful that we can begin talks on the framework of a possible agreement. But if they continue with contradictory and inconsistent positions, then it will be difficult.
In Lebanon, President Joseph Aoun revealed a plan to make sure the state has exclusive control of all weapons in the country within this year. Aoun wants to do this through direct talks with Hezbollah. But unsurprisingly, Hezbollah is firmly opposed to the proposal, which would get rid of its weapons. Here's the details.
Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has announced the plans to place all weapons in Lebanon under state control this year, signaling a significant shift in the country's political and military landscape. In an interview with a Qatari-affiliated news outlet Al Arab Al Jadid, Aoun explained that this change would happen through dialogue, specifically a direct bilateral approach between the presidency and Hezbollah. Aoun stressed that while removing Hezbollah's weapons is a priority, it must be done in a way that avoids triggering internal conflict. In a recent meeting with U.S. Deputy Mideast Envoy Morgan Ortagus, he made it clear, quote, "We want to remove Hezbollah's weapons, but we will not ignite a civil war in Lebanon." Speaking on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the outbreak of the Lebanese civil war, Aoun emphasized that only the state can guarantee the protection of its citizens.
Since we all agree that any weapons not sanctioned by the state or outside the state's control would jeopardize Lebanon's interests for more than one reason, the time has come for all of us to say Lebanon can only be protected by its state, its army, and its official security forces.
Despite international pressure to suppress the Iranian-backed Hezbollah, Aoun pushed back against U.S. demands, instead urging Washington to focus on Israel. He pointed out that the continued presence of Israeli forces in 5 disputed areas in southern Lebanon gives Hezbollah a justification for maintaining its weapons. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has rejected Aoun's disarmament plan. Senior official Mahmoud Kamati reaffirmed to Lebanese news channel Al Jadid the group's commitment to its weapons. Quote, "We are not willing to dialogue with the President of the Republic through the media about the defense strategy while the enemy is still on our land." In another development, the governor of Beirut has ordered the removal of all political and sectarian slogans from the city, with the goal of creating a more neutral urban environment. Sources close to Hezbollah told Ad-Diyar, a Lebanese newspaper, that discussions about disarmament are ongoing but without a clear timetable. Amid these tensions, Israel continued to target Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon. An IDF spokesman stated that Hezbollah uses a civilian infrastructure for military purposes, warning that Israel will take further action against the group if necessary.
Still with me here in studio, security analyst Jonathan Regev. Jonathan, Joseph Aoun thinks he can strike up a deal with Hezbollah through more of a national defense strategy, actually talking rather than force. But it doesn't seem Hezbollah is on board with this. And so what type of an incentives does the U.S. have to get on board and pressure Israel to kind of stand back when it comes to the Lebanese front?
I think that they do not. At the moment, there's Israel said loud and clear, where Israel is not going to withdraw from these 5 points it holds in Lebanese territory, because yes, the plan by President Aoun to disarm Hezbollah is very nice, but who says Hezbollah will agree? It's on the contrary. They said they will not agree. So if Hezbollah and their patrons in Tehran are saying no, then no. Hezbollah was very much weakened in its campaign with Israel, but it's still a remarkable force, possibly even still stronger than the Lebanese army and the Lebanese state itself. So can President Aoun force, through discussions, through power, Hezbollah to disarm? The answer is no. And as long as this happens, Israel will remain in its 5 strategic points within Lebanese territory. We've heard in this report that President Aoun told the Americans that it's the Israeli presence in those 5 points which gives Hezbollah the excuse to hold arms. Hezbollah was holding arms, and many more of them, when Israeli forces were not present in those 5 points. So the Israeli logic is, why should we, Israel, withdraw from these positions if no one can really guarantee that Hezbollah would eventually disarm?
Seems there needs to be some stronger reassurances coming out of Lebanon for any action, or lack of action that Israel needs to take. Security analyst Jonathan Regev, thanks for being with us on the Rundown and giving us your insight. Now, veterans of the IDF Paratrooper Brigade, Arik Sharon's soldiers, they recently marked the 70th anniversary of Operation Black Arrow, where Israel decided to initiate an operation behind the Egyptian enemy lines in the heart of the Gaza Strip. Ori Shapira from our I-24 News Hebrew channel. He met the veterans of the operation and heard about the chilling connection of one of the veteran fighters to the October 7th tragedy.
This moving gathering of seniors aged 90 and over is not just a reunion. It is an event to mark a seminal operation that changed the face of the Middle East about 70 years ago.
This was essentially the beginning of the modern Israeli army.
Residents of the new communities established along the border essentially said, "We have no security." People also started to flee, abandoning these communities, and Israel saw this reality as a strategic threat.
The climax was at Tel Mutula, where the IDF made every possible mistake, fighting for 4 days to remove a few Syrians. And then, in the end, Yigal Yadin, the then Chief of Staff, gave medals to the 2 commanders of the incident to erase the embarrassment.
Later, Israel, then led by Prime Minister Moshe Sharet, decided not to retaliate, but a series of incidents, including the infiltration of a secret facility in Rishon LeZion, tipped the balance.
There were essentially 2 camps in Israel. Moshe Sharet, who said, "Talk, negotiate. One day we will reach peace." David Ben-Gurion, and especially Chief of Staff Moshe Dayan, thought differently, namely, strike back with force.
Ariel Sharon was recruited for the mission, then a young officer, commander of the legendary Unit 101, which had carried out smaller operations also behind enemy lines. The paratrooper battalion commanded by Sharon was divided into 5 companies. Their goal was to raid a military camp, a water facility, and a train station in the heart of the Gaza Strip.
We assembled near Kibbutz Mefarsim. Sharon gathered everyone, showed a map of the place, told us what had happened, what was going to happen, and we left. There was a sign marking the border with a furrow like that. We crossed it, and as we crossed it, someone on the hill ahead of us shouted, "Who goes there?" It was an outpost we didn't know existed. We charged up, shooting. The border is right below. You can actually see it. Do you see that bright line? That's the border. We were sitting here at the edge of the orchard. We were sitting in columns. We were very tired from the training that had taken place before. Everyone was asleep. Sufafo, who was at the front, came out. This is the railroad that ran from Gaza to the north. We crossed the railroad tracks and started walking in the canal alongside the tracks. A man was walking on the train tracks, wearing a white shirt with some sort of bag. And he's walking on the tracks and we're sitting below. He saw us, turned his head, continued walking. As he passed, we broke in. Then we blew up the fence. We had to get into the camp. And that camp, we didn't know there were 2 separate camps.
The lack of intelligence led to a change in plan. The mission became complicated.
The original assessment was that the Egyptian army would not suffer many casualties. That wasn't the intention. We're talking about almost 50 Egyptians dead, which was truly unprecedented since 1948. And the Egyptian regime, of course, had no option but to respond. And on the other hand, there was a very large number of casualties on our side.
When we came at them, they started shooting. The first burst was low and hit me in the stomach, and I collapsed on the road. Sufafo ran 2 more steps and was hit in the head, and he was killed alongside me like that. When they were carrying me, I was conscious the whole time that they wouldn't take me on their trucks. We arrived in Israel. They lined up the dead. I was with the dead. I was dead number 9. The doctor decided I was dead. They put me with the dead. And the doctor, Dr. Shochet, did another review of the dead. He looked closely and saw that one of the dead had moved a little. The ambulances didn't arrive. They took the wrong turning. They put me on the front of the command car. He told them, "Go to Kaplan Hospital."
The operation claimed the lives of about 8 soldiers and serves as a stepping stone in Israel's retaliatory operations. A series of military operations behind enemy lines that culminated in Operation Kadesh, the Sinai campaign about a year later. The Israeli media was supportive of the operation, but Israel was criticized abroad.
There were incidents along the border for years, and suddenly here in Israel, changing the rules of the game and acting in a very significant and dramatic way. And of course, there was suspicion that Israel was looking for a deterioration leading to war, which later turned out to be true.
This is the first time since October 7 that Uri has returned to the memorial near Kibbutz Nir Am, adjacent to Gaza.
Always brings back memories. Very deep, let's say.
A visit to the area doesn't end at the memorial to Operation Black Arrow. On the morning of October 7, Uri's granddaughter, Eden Alon Levy, was killed in the battle for the Zikim outpost. Eden was a training instructor and fought at the guard post outside the base.
The team entered the post with her, and then a battle began with the terrorists who came from the sea. And they actually tried to break in here. They were determined to enter. And the soldiers barricaded themselves, and a battle began. There were, all 6 of them, inside this position. With the terrorists facing them, a battle was going on. She called us in the morning, about 7:30, something like that, and said they were being shot at and they were fighting. At 8:30, she sent a WhatsApp saying, "I love you," and that's the end of the contact. But the terrorists couldn't get in, and the base remained closed.
Was Operation Black Arrow a failure or a success? Opinions are divided. Historically, the operation is considered a real turning point in which the IDF moved from defense to offense, initiating and surprising the enemy. Later, the survivors of the operation would assume key positions in the Israeli leadership. Among them, Mota Gur, who became the IDF chief of staff, and Ariel Sharon, who became prime minister. From a historical perspective, it's hard not to feel a sense of frustrating repetition in the region as the guns of war continue to roar.
An amazing look back there at history and the connections that still lie right here in the year 2025. Now, this next story is truly a glimmer of hope and survival amid the rubble. A Cavalier King Charles Spaniel named Billy was kidnapped from Kibbutz Nir Oz on October 7th. After a year and a half in Gaza, a Golani Brigade soldier operating in Rafah, he found Billy. He says he thinks she heard his Hebrew and was immediately drawn to him. The soldier took Billy to a vet in Israel and checked her chip, which showed Billy belongs to Rachel Danzig, the ex-wife of Alex Danzig and the sister of Yitzhak Elgarat, who were both kidnapped and murdered in Hamas captivity. What you're watching right here is after 18 months, Rachel finally hugging her furry companion today in this incredibly heartwarming and long overdue reunion. Now, Time magazine released its list of the 100 most influential people of 2025. A list of major world leaders, Jewish figures, and now a former hostage. Noah Argamani is named as one of Time's most influential people of the year. Kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival on October 7th, 2023, and rescued in a daring operation last year, she has not stopped advocating for the release of the remaining hostages since, including her boyfriend, Avinatan Or, who is still in captivity. Noah was listed by Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, who wrote, "The video of Noah Argamani on October 7th, 2023 is forever seared into my soul. As she was kidnapped into Gaza on a motorcycle, her harrowing expression became a symbol of the pain and trauma Jews worldwide, myself included, continue to feel." Noah wrote on social media that she is honored to receive the reward and said, "I'm especially humbled to serve as a voice for the hostages who remain in captivity, those who cannot speak for themselves." Now, new research from Israel's Haifa University suggests Nova Musical Festival survivors who used drugs like MDMA and ecstasy that night, they might have been slightly protected from some of the trauma. Here's more on those findings.
As Shai Klein Weinstein walked around a memorial honoring the nearly 400 people killed at the Nova Music Festival in southern Israel, artillery fire could be heard echoing from nearby Gaza. The 28-year-old photographer and survivor of Hamas's attack recalled names and events from that fateful day, some of which he captured on film, documenting the final moments of his fellow revelers. Klein Weinstein, an immigrant from Canada who had arrived in Israel just 4 months prior to the attack, also recalled another detail from the festival, taking ecstasy. While still visibly shaken by the horrific experience, early findings from a study suggest that the MDMA Klein Weinstein and others at the festival took may have been helpful in cushioning the impact of the trauma they endured. The Haifa University study, which was recently accepted for publication in the World Psychiatry Journal, monitored 657 Nova survivors, both those who took drugs and those who did not.
People that were under the influence of MDMA specifically while the attack occurred had somewhat of an improved clinical outcome 3 to 6 months post-event. So they slept better, they had more social interactions, they had less mental distress compared to people who were exposed to the same exact event right next to them but were not under the influence of MDMA.
While trauma research is well established, the attack on a gathering like the Nova Festival has opened a new window into the effects of trauma under the influence of mind-altering substances.
We're talking about 4,000 people who were exposed on the same day, on the same time to the same event, which is a very, like I said, horrifying event. So that's a very unique finding. It was never reported before because it was never studied before because it never happened before.
Klein Weinstein said he is still struggling with trauma and has been undergoing therapy. Still, he believes the MDMA he took that night may have eased his symptoms somewhat.
Not too long ago, there was an interview by a media outlet, and in this interview, they said that Nova survivors were protected by the MDMA. You know, it saved us. It protected us from whatever, which I don't think is true, you know? I don't know anybody who didn't die because they were on MDMA. They were just as vulnerable as anyone else, and we were all in the same situation, but, you know, months after the fact, I think having been on these substances, specifically MDMA and ecstasy, I think it helped.
However, Adman was quick to caution that while MDMA may have offered a psychological buffer, the overall levels of PTSD among Nova survivors remained extremely high. He also noted that the study was limited by survivor bias, as researchers cannot learn from those killed in the attack.
2/3 of them were under the influence of different mind-altering substances during the attack. So, you know, like I said, trauma has been studied for decades in Israel and in other places, and we know a lot about trauma research. We don't know anything, nothing at all, about the response to trauma when people are, during the attack, during the traumatic event, acutely are under the influence of specific substances like cannabis, alcohol, and psychedelics like LSD and MDMA.
Klein Weinstein added that ecstasy, known as the love drug, just makes you happy, and that when everything was happening, he noticed that he wasn't really afraid for himself. His only concern was that he wouldn't be able to help his friends if something were to happen to them. For him, that was the worst feeling, not being in control.
Truly some incredible new findings to come out of such a traumatic event here in Israel. On that note, we do wrap up this latest edition of The Rundown here on I-24 News. A quick reminder of one of our top stories of the evening. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group has released a psychological terror video of Ron Blastovsky, one of the security guards at the Nova Music Festival. The 21-year-old has been in Hamas captivity for 558 days now. The family did allow us to publish a short clip of that video released by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, as it does, on the one hand, provide a shine of life for Ram, but the family says it is an incredibly emotional, bittersweet sign to see him struggling so much. 59 hostages still in Hamas captivity. That's all we have for you on this latest edition of The Rundown. As always, I'm Nicole Zedek. Thanks for watching us on I-24 News.
年徐家汇奔上海是3台合一的，其中包括昆山路距离上海15英里的佘山。从图中可以明显的看出，自上世纪90年代起，徐家汇站的温度与
The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on I24 News.
Frente e para cima dos grandes empreendimentos que estão em torno.
Welcome to Jewish World Weekly on I24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Every week, we're focusing on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel and throughout the diaspora, the global Jewish community. And we're starting with our top 5 items in the Jewish world, presented by our very own Nicole Zedek. Hi, Nicole.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. The United States Department for Homeland Security announced it will start looking at social media accounts of visa applicants for anti-Semitic activity. Visa applicants have had to include social media handles on applications ever since 2019, but these accounts will now be checked for any support of terror groups or online harassment and incitement against Jews. This comes amid several high-profile cases of international students facing deportation over alleged anti-Semitic activity. The Swedish Security Service accused Iran of using criminal gangs, including minors, to target Israeli and Jewish sites in Sweden. According to a CNN report, these gangs, including 2 rival groups, carried out attacks at Iran's request, including firing shots at the Israeli embassy in Stockholm. The report also says Iranian agents have used local gangs to plan attacks against Jewish sites across Europe, including a synagogue in Germany and a community center in Greece. Colombia has appointed an alleged fake rabbi as the nation's new director of religious affairs. Richard Gamboa Ben Eliezer has been shunned by Colombia's Jewish community due to his strong anti-Zionist stance, including calling Israel a neo-Nazi state. While they don't recognize him as a legitimate rabbi, as he was ordained in Florida's esoteric theological seminary, where you're able to buy a rabbinical degree as well as a shaman or Celtic druid, and it only costs $150. Ben Eliezer also posted a picture on his LinkedIn showing his certificate from the so-called ceremony, which the Institute is offering on its website for only $700 and a 4,000-word thesis. A new report shows nearly $60 billion worth of possessions have been seized from Egyptian Jews in the 20th century. Historically, Jews have always had a presence in Egypt, but many Jews either left, were forced to flee, or were killed after the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood and subsequent creation of the State of Israel in 1948, the Suez Crisis in 1956, and the Six-Day War in 1967. At its peak in the 19th century, close to 100,000 Jews lived in Egypt. Today, less than 5 Jews live there. And finally, Florida Gators Todd Golden has become the first Jewish coach to win March Madness in 37 years. The former Maccabi Haifa player narrowly beat the Houston Cougars in the final game, where they faced Houston's Israeli-American shooting guard, Emmanuel Sharp. Golden also beat out fellow Jewish coaches John Shire and Bruce Pearl of Duke and Auburn universities, respectively. Now, those are your top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
With a population of nearly 21 million, of which there are less than 3,000 Jews in Kazakhstan, the Central Asian mountainous country remains committed to honoring and validating Jewish history in education. A new report released by the Institute for Monitoring Peace and Cultural Tolerance in School Education, known as Impact SE, has found that school curriculums and textbooks there describe Judaism as one of the world's foundational monotheistic religions, and also talks about how Jews contributed to global culture, science, as well as intellectual life. Joining us now with more is Marcus Sheff, the CEO of Impact SE. Thank you for being here, and quite a robust study you're doing.
Well, thank you. Yes, Impact SE actually conducted 3 interviews with, 3 pieces of research in relation to the school curricula. Those in Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. We did them with the Ruderman Foundation. And we looked specifically at the portrayal of Israel and Jews in their textbooks, in their public curriculum. These are, of course, very significant countries. They are situated where Europe meets Turkey, Iran, and Russia. But, of course, they are also Muslim majority countries. And I do want to say, fascinatingly, that the results are more encouraging than research we are doing in some European countries. In the portrayal of Israel and Jewish life, the findings leave really a lot of room for optimism. Textbooks used in schools in those 3 countries, in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan, they offer a fair and positive descriptions of the Jewish people. And, all 3 countries do take this huge pride in their ethnic and religious diversity. It's a central component of who they are, their civic identity. And as a result, their attitude towards Judaism and Jews is overwhelmingly respectful. Jews are regarded as an equal minority, a valued part of each country's social fabric. The Holocaust is covered by all 3 countries with varying degrees of depth, but it isn't overlooked. And all 3 countries take a markedly neutral and, really importantly, an accurate tone in addressing the Israel-Arab conflict.
It's really so interesting. And you think about it, you go back, in history, there are thousands of years of history. I mean, the spice trade, the Bukharis, like that region goes back, they say, to the first exile, which is quite incredible. I mean, do you think there's a basis from the historical, perspective? Has it been this long-standing relationship with the Jewish people up until, now we have textbooks and could, do these studies, but that wasn't always the case.
No, absolutely. Talking to officials in all of these countries, the overwhelming feeling that I get is how surprised they are that we are surprised that they are teaching in this inclusive, in this peaceful, and in this tolerant way. Because for them, as they say to me very clearly, you know, it is a way of life for them. These Jewish communities have always been a part of them, but in a wider sense, the idea of tolerance, the idea of peacemaking is part of their national identities. Of course, you know, they are three separate countries. You can't entirely bundle them together. You know, Azerbaijan is the first Muslim country that we know about to include the definition of anti-Semitism in its textbooks. And I will say that we don't see that in many Western European countries. They removed anti-Israel narratives, really a balanced overview of the conflict. Again, a really respectful curriculum towards Jewish beliefs, and really importantly, attitudes towards radicalization. It's very clear they do not want it in their school curriculum. No signs of radical ideas that we see in other places. And Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, you know, we can really get the same kind of ideas in relation to not wanting radical ideas in their curriculum. Uzbekistan actually has a very clear Jewish history curriculum, and a curriculum about Jews and their practices. So they talk about Orthodox, conservative reform.
Wow.
I'm not even
it's
sure
incredible.
that the Israeli curriculum is that accurate. So, you know, really, really, really important because of where they are strategically, these countries, because they are Muslim majority, and I think that they have a lot to teach to European countries.
Well, and I think, and the world, we're looking, let's just not forget the United States. They're closing the Department of Education, Jewish history, the Holocaust is like shut out of, you know, main universities and campuses. So these guys should be, you know, a model for the rest of the world. If only we could do something more about it.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Irish textbooks talked about Auschwitz as a prisoner of war camp, essentially trivializing it. Polish textbooks, you know, we still find anti-Semitic narratives there. You know, in each one of those, we do find positive material as well. But these European countries really can and should try harder. And I think the Central Asian countries, and as you say, in the United States as well, there is much to learn from them.
Yeah, for sure. All right, thank you so much, Marcus Sheff, the CEO of Impact SC. And finally, nice to do research on something that has something positive when we're used to anything but in the past year and a half. Much appreciated. Many don't realize that the wave of converso Jews fleeing the Inquisition landed on the shores of many Caribbean islands centuries ago. Today, there are Chabad centers in nearly every island, including the small island of St. Lucia. Joining us now from St. Lucia is Rabbi Avromi Super. Hello, and nice view behind you.
Thank you. How are you?
Doing well. Not a bad place to live and to be doing all your great work. I know you have experience traveling the world. What made you, you know, set up shop in St. Lucia and, you know, creating the first Jewish community center there?
Right. So I've been to now over 30 countries across every continent, every inhabited continent, that is. We ended up here. There was a small Jewish community here, and they had requested permanent programming, and they had put in a request to different Chabad rabbis in the region, and we were the right people at the right time, and here you are for 7 years.
Wow, it's pretty incredible. I mean, is there a big Jewish community? I imagine there's a lot of, I mean, it's such a beautiful place. I imagine, you know, expats, travelers, but is there a community there that's there all year round?
Yeah, so there's people here all year round, but our community here is primarily focused on second homeowners. So there's a large group of Jewish people from the UK, Canada, the United States that own homes here, and they spend a significant portion of the year here, and they make up the bulk of our community.
Wow, incredible. Let's talk about the plans for Passover. Tell us what you're going to do, and how do you get all the food? How do you get the good gefilte fish and the matzah meal and all of that stuff there?
Everything's going to be brought in. Everything from scratch is going to be brought in from the States. And actually, the way that I'm preparing, and I think the best way to prepare, is making sure that every Jew on the island has matzah. And not only the Jews on our island, but we're helping arrange matzah for Jews on various other islands, from St. Vincent and the Grenadines to Trinidad and Tobago, and even you see in the picture there from Guyana.
Wow, quite incredible. And then you also you went to Guyana. You did to fill in for the president's son. How did that come about?
So actually interesting. So I always knew that the president, Jeanette Jagan Rosenberg, was Jewish. Her husband was the founding father of Guyana. And I'd always been fascinated with her and her story. And one day I decided, let's find out whether she has kids, because her kids are Jewish, obviously. And I asked a few of my contacts in Guyana whether or not they could connect me to him. And everyone said, no, we don't know him. He's not involved in the Jewish community. So I found out that he's a dentist in central Georgetown in Guyana. And I figured I'll take a box of matzah and my tefillin and I'll walk to his dentist office. Worst case scenario, I'll have to make a dental appointment. And I walked in and he was really, really happy to see me, and we've become very close.
Oh, that is so incredible. I'm sure it's really meaningful, and to be there holding down the fort. Do you have any? I know that you have to work with the government. Are they open-minded, and the rest of the community in the island supportive? Are they curious? Have they gotten to know you?
Yeah, so everyone here, the Caribbean's a very, very friendly place. People are lovely. We're very well accepted here in every country we go to, and the governments are assisting us. And they're very supportive of us, and Jewish life is thriving in the Caribbean.
Amazing. All right. Thank you very much. And Chag Sameach, Nes here in Israel, Rabbi Avromi Super.
Thank you.
40-year-old Raif Rashed, a member of Israel's Druze community, was serving up culinary treats in his food truck at the Nova Festival, surviving the October 7th terror onslaught. But his life forever changed, and now he's taking his artistic skills and flavors to new heights. Please welcome to our show Raif Rashed, joining us from New York City. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. In my own home, we've switched places here. Let's start with not delving too much into the horrific experience of the massacre at the Nova Festival. What can you tell us? I mean, there were some, you were able at some point to use your phone to help, unfortunately, one of the hostages who is still there. What was that experience like for you, and how has it impacted you continually?
Actually, it's still with me until now, and that day, the guy called Ron Bostatsky, he called his mom 10 o'clock, and he told her, we are good, we are in the same place, and don't worry, I'm gonna come back soon. And actually, he lied. Yeah. And that was the last call with his mom, and after that, what I realized is his mom sent me a picture from the Hapak and asked me if you were with me there, and then after 2 months I understand he's just still in Gaza.
Oh, it's got to be so difficult. Also, I know that you lost some close friends. So, you explain, in interviews, and I'm sure this is very common among survivors, is having a sense of survivor guilt. How has cooking and your culinary prowess, helped you deal with these lingering feelings?
Wow, that definitely is helping me. This is my healing now. Yeah, to serve and introduce the culture and maybe make some connection between people. This is helping me, definitely helping me I try to get back the engineering job, but no, I can't be more under pressure or under anything.
Yeah.
I just have to heal myself and maybe try to make some connection between people. Yeah, I speak in Arabic, Hebrew, and English, and yeah, I have the connection.
So, and also, A lot of people don't realize, sorry to interrupt you, but, you know, the Druze culture is so special, very loyal to Israel. You also served in the IDF, but the food's incredible. I mean, the food, you know, is known. You know, many people drive far to go to a Druze restaurant, family-owned restaurants, amazing hospitality. So to open your new place, Tibunia, in Chelsea, of all places, is a prime location. How are people responding?
Wow, amazing. I finally feel home here in New York City. You know, it's amazing. The people around support and come in and be here and just love the atmosphere and the flavor and the story and wow.
Do people ask questions? Like, if you're getting a different clientele, not just Israelis or, you know, people that maybe aren't familiar with the food, do you find you're able, especially being Druze, you don't eat, you know, it's a little bit less, I guess, intense, but you could really talk about from all perspectives, you know, of this conflict, I imagine.
Yeah. So I'm here. I'm Israeli Druze. My partner is Lebanese Druze, and we have here. I mean, speaking here 3 languages: Arabic, Hebrew, and English. And I accept all the people. You know, we're in different place now. Yeah.
Well, New York is clearly.
Before I tried to, you know, many protests around here in New York City, but it's impossible to speak with the people or try to understand how they're thinking, but no. So the food maybe makes some connection. When you're hungry, you know. When you're full, you smile. Then we can talk.
But what's it like? I mean, you're in New York, and there's great places to find spices, but so much of the cuisine is so unique to things that are actually grown here. Have you had to kind of readjust some, you know, how do you find some of the special ingredients that aren't in the everyday supermarkets there?
So the ingredients from Israel. From Israel, I have the real flavor of the Middle East. Yes, the za'atar, the olives, the labane, everything. All the ingredients coming from Israel, so the flavor is the same, and I know how to combine the flavor together and make and then when you make the food with love, it's a different story.
Absolutely incredible, and best of luck. Next time I'm in New York, I promise to come see you. Thank you very much. I will be there. I promise I'll be there. I've spent a lot of time in Chelsea, and now I have a reason to go visit. So everybody go check it out and enjoy some delicious Druze cuisine. Trust me, it's very good if you haven't tried it. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This next story is one of hope and healing as a nonprofit organization takes wounded Israeli soldiers on a trip of a lifetime, all to show them that there is life beyond their injuries. Here's more from I-24 News correspondent Nicole Zedek, who went to New York with the Belev Echad organization and has this story.
A very warm welcome in New York for a group of wounded Israeli soldiers who need some much-needed rest and recovery.
הרגשה כיפית, אתה זוכה פה מאוד להכיר חבר'ה באמת, כי אתה חי איתם במשך 10 ימים. אתם עושים דברים מטורפים שלא יצא לך לעשות ביום-יום, כמו לטוס בהליקופטר, או להיות בבניינים מטורפים, או לפגוש אנשים חשובים.
Belev Echad, or One Heart in Hebrew, started 15 years ago as a way to bring soldiers to the United States and provide a break from their rehabilitation in Israel.
Before October 7th, Belev Echad was helping restore soldiers to life. That was our mission. It was whatever that entailed. And after that, it has been saving soldiers' lives.
Their mission shifted post-October 7th, and so did the demand. The organization went from helping 500 soldiers to helping 2,000, bringing in newly injured soldiers like Ori Maimon. He was injured near the Lebanon border on October 8th in a not often talked about reality of war, friendly fire.
אני קולט שחייל פותח עליי זיק, רואה את המחסנית שלו נופלת, אני אומר, טוב, בטח הוא הולך עכשיו לראות איך שאני מתכופף, יש רעש של בום, משפשף אותי כדור פה על הראש. אני והחופל שלי ישבנו בתוך האוטו וצרחנו חדל, 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 אבל בגלל הכמות ירי שהייתה שם, אז כנראה שלא שמעו את זה.
More than 500 bullets were fired at Ori and the driver sitting next to him. Ori was shot 5 times, 4 in the leg and 1 grazing his head. He underwent 6 operations, and that's when B'lev Echad volunteers visited Ori for the first time in the hospital.
When they're in the hospital, we actually have staff, wounded soldiers that go and visit different hospitals across Israel every single day, all the hospitals, and they meet the soldiers as soon as they're injured.
It was a lot of fun having them come to me. It took me 4 months until I realized what they're actually doing, but today I liked it so much that today I volunteer for B'lev Echad to go visit other wounded soldiers in the hospital, and I enjoy it very much.
Ori's not only sharing his experience with injured soldiers, but also with donors in New York who help fund his recovery.
Every diaspora Jew, we all feel a little guilty that we're not there, not doing more, and we should. But at least when you do things like this, it makes you feel like you're a little bit more connected and giving back the little we can do. So we should all be doing as much as we can. And I highly recommend everyone should get involved in B'lev Echad.
The name B'lev Echad is actually one heart. B'lev Echad means we are one with our soldiers. In other words, the American community here is one with our soldiers. I can tell you the people in New York and in America care deeply.
And so do the doctors in the United States, who are providing new prosthetics to some of the soldiers.
The level of care in Israel is superb. And these are techniques and approaches that are just a little bit different based on our experiences here. Part of that experience is that we have many individuals with limb loss in this country, more than in Israel. And all I'm trying to do is to lend our experience to help optimize these soldiers who deserve the best care.
While Israel has some of the best doctors in the world, the United States has more experience in prosthetics, with nearly 2 million Americans using a prosthetic limb.
A prosthetist in America, in order to be able to give a prosthetic, needs 8 years of training. In Israel, no training is required. You want to open up a laboratory, you can open up and you give a prosthetic.
But B'lev Echad and Dr. Omri Ayalon are trying to bridge the gap, with Israeli doctors flying to New York to gain more experience in the field.
One of my main goals with this whole initiative is to create a completely self-sustaining system like this in Israel. Because obviously the goal is to be able to have all of these treatments and level of care in Israel. That's been my goal from day one.
But the broader goal of B'lev Echad is to have no more need for their help.
Our vision at B'lev Echad is to shut the organization down. We truly pray every day that we won't need any more wounded souls. That's our vision. That's what we work for every day. But until that happens, we're just going to have to do everything we can for our wounded soldiers.
Providing healing and hope that you can continue to live with a life-changing injury.
If you're a wounded soldier out there, know that there's help. Know that, when you look at our soldiers who've been with us for 15 years and you look back and see there's life. You're missing a leg, you're missing a hand, you can actually move on in life.
In New York, Nicole Zedek for I-24 News.
And that's all for this week's episode of Jewish World Weekly. Please head over to I-24 News' YouTube channel to catch up on this episode as well as previous episodes. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Emily Francis, and shalom from Tel Aviv.
Bad posture, the ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to